So thank you everyone for coming today. I really appreciate it. And if we're just all coming in, cool. Today we're going to talk about customizing the Salesforce Console using the Integration Toolkit. I mean, this is a part of Salesforce that Andy and I really like working with, and hopefully the idea is to inspire you guys to kind of build your own components and have a success with using the console in the future. But I'm going to go through my standard, fun Salesforce harbor, safe harbor. Enjoy at your own pleasure. But just going to take you through today. So you have myself and we have Andy Mahood here. So we both work for a company called Tequila. So we're a Salesforce Platinum partner in the UK, but we have offices in Germany, Japan, and also Australia and India. And my role as Service Cloud Practice Director is to really push customers to use really cool things like the console and the components. And we're seeing lots of amazing things from our customers. And they're using tools which Andy and I are going to talk about today. So what you'll be seeing are real-life examples. But to talk about Andy, I'm going to hand over to himself, as he's the expert.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name's Andy Mahood. I'm a technical architect at Tequila. So my job is really making sure that everything that we deliver is going to sort of work successfully for the customer.
Brilliant. Okay, so why are you guys here today? So I'm going to start off talking about the Salesforce Console and really talking about what it solves today, and that's a big part. And then we're going to hand over to Andy, who's going to do most of the work here, but talk about some examples of components, and then actually going to build some out on the stage and go through in a lot of detail of what they look like. And at the end, we're going to have some questions and answers at the back there. Okay, so without further ado, the Salesforce Console, question mark. So quick show of hands. Who here has used the console on a project for internally? Well, a lot of people. And maybe for fun? No. Hands up if you used the Integration Toolkit. Nice, nice. Well, hopefully for you guys, we're going to cover off some new ground for you today, which you may have not come across before. But if there is something new, if there's some questions at the end, please use the Q&A session. We'll talk through them there. Okay. So really then, to get to the heart of things, so what is the console? So how I explain this to customers really is, the console is an interface over the entire of your Salesforce data. And at the heart of it is to drive productivity. And what customer group or group internally needs productivity the most? That's normally customer service. To do things such as really drive home really expertise or customer service to their customers. But it's not necessarily just to those guys. I mean, we see customers such as sales groups using the console, inside sales, and anything that needs complex data. But the most amazing thing really about this is a whole new paradigm for developers to build on. So we're seeing lots of really cool use cases being built, things such as single customer views, to give the customer, the agents a full overview of the experience here. So to kind of really show that, we're going to have a little demo. So really what I want to show here is a typical customer service example. And this is things Andy and I have seen on quite regular occasions now. But I'm going to jump into Salesforce in a second. But what I'm going to show is really what it looks like before, and now what it looks like with a little bit of work using the console and the Integration Toolkit, how much of a difference it can really make to a customer service agent. But here's our example. So we have Wes, customer service agent. And he's going to be our example for today. His main goal is to give a luxury experience to all his customers. And he needs to do that he has Salesforce to do that job, but actually to give the complete journey, he has to log into multiple systems in order to give all the kind of data, return order numbers, all that information to the customer. And that really causes a major headache because they're disparate systems, so he has to actually take information from one system, from Salesforce, into other ones, and it's all a bit messy, and it causes data to kind of get messed up, and the customer has a really poor experience at the end of it. So I'm just going to jump into Salesforce now. Give this 2 seconds. So what we have here is kind of life before a project is undergone using the toolkit. So we have a really basic console here, and we have kind of our list view with the subject on here. If I click into this, it's giving me, it's not very sexy, right? It's quite boring, to be honest. And if the goal for Wes here as a customer service agent is to give a luxury experience to his customers, this console is not doing much to really help that at all. It's just kind of subject and description and a few things to give his manager the information he needs. So not really helpful at all. But if we look at this case in more detail, we can see we have an issue here with a jelly beans order, which is the case in question. And Wes has actually had to check up this order in an old school system. Luckily now he has an order number, but there's nowhere else for him to go from here. He has to actually log out of the console. To actually do this, what Wes does, and this may seem a bit silly, what I'm going to show you now, but we see this in customers quite often, is actually what Wes does, he takes a notepad and he writes down the actual customer order number here, along with all his other notes. So he's actually been doing this throughout the entire day. And he logs into our super cool system here.
Wes doesn't know how to copy and paste.
Yeah. But what he'll actually do is he'll come onto the system here, he'll log in, he'll get the information, and sometimes when it works, he'll go from up, but he has to actually come back again, answer the customer, and log information there. So really, you can see, the journey, the end goal for Wes is going to give a luxury experience. He's not really giving a luxury experience at all. It's quite messy. But what I want to show you now is a little bit of work with Integration Toolkit, how that can actually change pretty much everything. So what we have here is we have our console. I'm going to zoom in a little bit there and change this around. We can see up front, this is completely different. So we actually have a bit more information about where the case came from, more of the subjects, actually details about the SLA. So the first thing off you can see straight away, it's not just two fields and a case object. Actually the console itself is working to help Wes give that luxury experience to the customers. But if I go into here, give that 1 second, and zoom out. Sorry, apologies for that. We can actually see a completely different user experience here. So we have the header at the top here, which is actually showing in big, bold letters what's going on. And we can see a lot more useful information. But a big thing here, we're using this brand new component section on the side. There's a knowledge base articles telling me, actually, there's a production issue gone on down in the jelly bean factory. And that's actually going to cause all the orders to be delayed. So I can actually use this information, which someone else in the knowledge base team has actually built. He actually transpose that information back to the customer. But if you remember before we had this order number, why would you want to log into another system? We have Salesforce here. If we actually click into this section here, the customer view, we can actually see where's his actual order, or the order for Wes to actually use and give to the customer. And I can actually click straight into that, and I can see all the detail of the order straight away. So if we compare that to what we actually saw a second, the console is there to serve the agent and in turn give the customer that really good experience. Worlds apart, completely different, but we actually can see a little bit of effort using the console can actually go a long way to giving that experience a lot further. But that was just some real-life examples I wanted to show you. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Andy, who's going to actually show you a bit more of these components and how they're actually built.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. Let me flip back into some slides. So we do have a few slides. I'm going to talk over what exactly the Integration Toolkit is, and then we're going to go into actually seeing some code and how we actually build one up, and add and make an app which is context-aware within the console. So the question is, how do I hack this thing? So how do I actually get into the console and start developing around it? So what you might have seen in Dave's demo was that there's a number of places where you can inject your own code or your own user interface into the UI of the console. So we've got along the top, which is called the highlights panel. You can override that with your own Visualforce. And along the bottom, which is the interaction log, you can override that with your own Visualforce as well. And we've got the sections on the left and right. So if I go on to the next slide, you'll see that we had the example of the customer view put into the right-hand side of the console. And with one of the most recent releases from Salesforce, you can now stack these components on the side. So you can add as many of your own components to the side of the console as you want, and it will stack them like an accordion, like you can see here. Creating these pages is very much like creating Visualforce in line within a page layout, so it just needs to be built with a standard controller, and it will become available within the page layout to be able to be associated on the right-hand side or the left-hand side or the top or the bottom. If you want to be able to interact with the rest of the console, that's where the Integration Toolkit comes in. So finally, we've got the footer, which is along the bottom, which we can see here. Hold on, I can zoom in a little bit. So we've got an example here of my SLA, which is I want to show a chart of how my team is performing and how I'm performing against my team. We've got Live Agent, which is a standard component, which if you have Live Agent within your org, you'll see that. And Phone as well, if you're using a CTI provider, then this will come up, and the Phone integration uses the Integration Toolkit to pop customer screens and to pop cases as well. So the footer components open in a sort of a frame, a small window. So this is where you have your own Visualforce page. In this example, this isn't a standard controller because this is loading completely outside of the context of what's currently loaded within the console. So to be able to get that sort of context of what the customer service agent's already looking at, that's where we start to need the Integration Toolkit. Also quite cool, you can pop these out and drag them around the screen. So if your agents have multiple monitors, they can drag them around, and the session will remember where these are. So what is actually available with the Integration Toolkit? So there's sort of 5 key areas. The first one is interacting with console tabs. Then we've got sort of overriding the console UI, so you've got changing the style of those footer buttons, for example. Push notifications, which aren't mobile push notifications, unfortunately. Phone CTI and Live Agent. So if we dive into each one of those, so with the tabs, you can do some very basic things, just like opening a console tab, focusing on a console tab, refreshing a console tab. The most important really is getting the ID of the record within the tab, because that's when you can start to sort of drive context from what the agent's currently looking at. So an example here is that there's methods to provide you back a list of all the tabs that are currently open, where you can iterate through those, getting the ID of the record that's currently opening, and bringing that into your console app to provide context back. And we're going to show that as an example in a minute. So around the user interface, I showed you an example of a footer component which had a chart. In the example I'm going to show, and we're going to build out, we're going to change the background color of that button based on the SLA of the case that I'm currently looking at. So it will go green if I'm within the SLA and red if I've breached the SLA. Okay, so push notifications are a bit confusing because everyone thinks of mobile phones. So push notifications are really a way for a developer to hook into something that your admin can configure. So an admin can configure list views or page layouts to either have an icon at the top of them or to refresh automatically if certain fields change on that object. So a good example of that would be the status on the case. So if I'm an agent, I'm looking at a list view, or if I'm looking at a case tab, and the status of that case changes, then I want to be notified that someone else is messing around with my case, or that my list view is now stale. So programmatically, you can create these events or these listeners. An example could be that if you have one customer service team that really care about when the status changes, and another team might care about if the last modified date changes, for example. And finally, we've got the phone and Live Agent. So these are really designed for ISVs, building applications that hook into sort of Live Agent or CTI. However, they're available to everyone, so if you don't like your phone provider's CTI agent, you can build your own. If you don't like how Salesforce has implemented Live Agent for your agents, you can spend that time and write your own. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. So now we're going to go into actually implementing the toolkit and the steps you actually need to take. So first of all, it's just JavaScript, right? So you drop this into your page, and you have access to all of those methods. So it's as simple as that, right? So if we're writing Visualforce, then we just need to drop in the include script. If we're implementing a Canvas app, so in all of these places, I've been talking about Visualforce. It's something I'm more familiar with. But you can also drop Canvas into each of these locations as well. When you need to do that, it's a bit more tricky. You need to sort of pass your authentication over. But you drop in the JavaScript just the same, and you have access to all of those methods as well. So the real reason why the Integration Toolkit is required, when you look at the console, you're actually looking at sort of a collection of frames. your Visualforce page is being loaded on one domain, your page is being hosted on another. So if you wanted to interact between the two pages, you can have a problem. So is anyone aware of what problem you might be having in that situation? Yeah, exactly. So you start to fulfill the same origin policy, which is security built into the browser, which means you can't sort of hack through JavaScript across a couple of different domains. And that's one of the key reasons why the Integration Toolkit is really useful, because it solves that problem for you. You can then communicate between your different frames using the toolkit. And you can communicate back to the console. And before we dive into the demo, I wanted to highlight that the toolkit is asynchronous. So it's JavaScript methods that execute asynchronously. So this is really worth being aware of before you start sort of designing out your application, because now you need to start to handle how you're going to handle sort of the callbacks from each of these methods. So I've got an example here. Sorry, let me go into the actual code. Right, so I've made this really amazing console app called Console Example. And this really helps my agents open a tab. So I can click this button and my agent can open a tab, which is amazing. So if we go into the code, this is what the code looks like. So I've got the Integration Toolkit dropped in, the JavaScript dropped in. I've got a standard HTML input, which calls my JavaScript method, which then calls the console method open primary tab. I pass in a few methods. Null is the tab ID. So the tab ID isn't the record ID that's loaded within the tab. It's like an ID local to the console, which is a bit funny. So I'm opening a new tab, so I'm just going to pass in null. I then pass in a relative URL of the page that I want to open. And off the top of my head, I know that /00t/e is going to open a new task. I then pass true, which is do I focus on that tab or not? If that was false, it would sort of open in the background. And finally, I pass in new task, which is the name. And then actually, sorry, I've got the callback. So in this example, I've got a callback where then I can sort of handle if that opened properly, if there was an error. So we can see on line 7, I've got an alert saying, should this fire first? And on line 12, I've got another alert saying, or should this fire first? So who can guess which will actually fire first, line 7 or line 12? Show of hands if you think it's line 7. Line 12? Neither? Okay. Let's see. So I've saved it. Oh. Did that go through?
Yes, it did.
Yeah? So I open my really cool app, hit it again, it says, or should this fire first? There you go. So you're all correct, well done. So the reason for that is because it's asynchronous, it's going to pass straight through to line 12 before the other line is fired. So this is a really simple example of that, but you can get into some really horrible situations with some spaghetti code if you're doing things, and you'll actually see it in the example. I've got some nice spaghetti code, where if we want to open actually I'll show you the example. In this example, on the customer view, we show some case numbers. So what I don't want to happen is for every time I open one of those case numbers, it's going to open a new tab. If that case number is already open, I want to focus on the tab. So there isn't a console method that allows me to just say either open it or focus on it. Because I said the console tabs have an ID, and it's not the record ID. So to get that behavior, you first need to inspect all the tabs that are currently open, so which is one call, then you need to handle it, handle the response. And then for each tab that's currently open, you then need to make a call to the method to check what the ID is, and then check that the ID is what you're currently trying to open. And if you find the result, then you'll focus on it. If you don't find the result, then you're going to open. So you could have sort of 15 tabs open. For each of those, you're going to spin off a call to check the ID, and then you need to make sure all of those callbacks have been successful, and then you can open your tab. So it can just get a bit messy. So what I actually want to show you is what we're going to do is we're going to build out our SLA app. So this is a really cool chart that shows the performance of our agents. So this is the same one I showed you on the slides, but orange probably. So you can see that Andy Maherd, I'm the second one along, and then Dave is the fourth one along. So I'm doing better than Dave at the moment.
Standard.
And you can see these red X's are our, that's our target. So Dave's really close to getting sacked.
That's actually not true, just let me know.
So what I actually want to be able to do is, let me close some of these. What I want to be able to do is know, let me close these. When I'm looking at this case, I want to know where does this case actually fit. So this is bringing that context into the app. So I know that on average of all the cases that are open, I'm on about 32. And I know that my target is 50. But what's the case I'm currently looking at? Like, can I go for a tea break or do I need to answer it? So to do that, I need to use the Integration Toolkit to bring in the context of 1101, find out the duration, and then display it on my chart. So we're going to go through the steps of how do we bring that context into our app. And I'm not going to write it out. I'm going to copy and paste it from a text file, but we'll go through it step by step. So in my controller, I've actually already got a case ID that I pass into the controller, and that I'm already handling sort of querying for the duration of that case ID if I pass it. So what we're actually going to look at is saying, how do we pass that case ID up? How do we get the context of what that case ID actually is that the agent is already looking at? So the first thing I'm going to do is going to add a new line series to my chart, and this is displaying the current case duration that we have open right now. So if I save that, it's just going to say nothing because we're not actually passing the ID back to the controller. So what we need to be able to do is drop in, which you can see here. So drop in the JavaScript for the Integration Toolkit. So now I can start to add my JavaScript methods to sort of call the Integration Toolkit. So this is where these guys come in. Okay, so what I've got now is some JavaScript in there. So when the page loads, it's going to attach an event to the primary tab being changed. So we've got this console method called onFocusPrimary tab. So this is actually going to be an event which is going to call redraw chart, which is my JavaScript function I've got there. So every time I switch primary tab, it's going to call my function redraw chart, which in turn is going to call my action function, which is then going to re-render my output panel, which is actually presenting my chart. Okay? So let me save that, and then I'll refresh, and we can see that when I move, I'm going to move between the different tabs, and the chart will redraw with the context of the current case that I'm looking at, presenting the duration of that case. Fingers crossed. Whoops. Okay, so when I opened 1003, the chart redrew, and we've now got the new line series, which is telling me that actually this case is well below target and well below my average, so I can have a tea break, which is good. Open the other one, and that's looking pretty good as well. Is there an example? So here's an example where the actual case duration is over the target. So this is one where we've actually failed. So you can see immediately how this is adding value back to that chart. Because originally I could have had a dashboard, which I would have gone to and seen my average case duration, which would have been nice. You can use a dashboard in Salesforce, which would have been cool. But in the first incarnation of this, I brought that into the console, so it meant that I didn't have to leave the console to go and see that dashboard. Now in this incarnation is now bringing the context in from that page to tell me how I'm currently performing on the case that I'm looking at. So the next thing I want to do is be able to actually look at the case, because I can't serve the customer because I've got this stupid chart in the way. So I want to be able to close that, and now I don't know how I'm doing anymore. So I'm now going to use some of the UI methods of the Integration Toolkit to change how the MySLA button actually looks when I'm changing between tabs as well. So I'm going to add some more JavaScript in. So this time we've got a function here called apply button style. Chucking in some parameter to tell me which style I should use. But you can see we've got this option here called set custom console component button style. So with this, you can pass in any CSS you want, and it will, well, yeah, any CSS that you want. It will change the sort of the color, the design, the font, the whatever it could be, the background image of that button. So in this situation, it's going from red to green, based on whether it's past the target or not. And I've had to also add this in, which gives me back that little chart icon, because as soon as you override the styles, it sort of drops that icon that your admin set up. So you just need to chuck that back in. Oh, no, sorry, that's not all I need to do.
You should buy it, though. It's only fair.
So I'm also going to sort of pop this in. So this is really, so when my output panel redraws, it's going to call this method, this function, sorry. Okay, so the output panel is going to redraw. It's going to call apply button style, which is then going to check whether I want to show the warning or not. So that's coming down from the controller. And then it's going to call the integration toolkit to change the color of that button, right? So I don't even need to have that chart open. Do you need to refresh though? So now as I flip between these cases, I can see that it's always going to be green because I know that these ones are okay, right? I can't remember which one was bad.
It was sample case 2.
Okay, there we go. So it's now gone red as soon as I've flicked on 1001. So I don't even need to have that chart open. It just takes me, it is sort of a visual alert to tell me that I need to pay that some attention. So I can open this case, it's going to go red. I can take a look and see how bad it is. So I now know that actually my Dave, I might get fired and not Dave, unless I answer this case. So these are some of the examples that, hold on. So these are some examples that we've put together just to demonstrate how you build a toolkit app or a console app using the Integration Toolkit. These are available on GitHub, so you can fix my code and give me a pull request if you don't like my JavaScript.
They're all taking photos right now, just to let you know.
I'll put that slide back up. So before we go into questions, the best place to go and get information about the toolkit is by Googling Salesforce Console Toolkit, and you'll get all the docs. So this is a sort of an API that isn't publicized that well. So it's got the URL there as well if you don't want to Google it for whatever reason. But let's go back to any questions. So if anyone's got any questions, I think the mics should be working in the middle. So you can stand up in the middle if you want to ask any questions. None?
No?
Cool.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Yep. So thank you guys very much.